Work. Hello.
Okay. Everyone, hello, you must be the panel. Hello, panel. This is you, I'm Charles. Lost my badge somewhere. Do you want me to speak on a microphone? Because I guess is this being taped or streamed? Yeah. So a microphone is a good idea, right? Hello, hello, hello. Good to see you all. Welcome. I'm Charles Falzon. I'm the Dean of the Creative School, which is the faculty that houses some of the most amazing media and design programs in the country. So I gather most of you are alumni of this faculty. Are you? So I know there's a lot of fashion people here, right? Who came from the world of fashion. Can I just see hands? Who went to the School of Fashion? Cool. Did anybody come from other schools? You've got RTA. What programs are you from? Oh, great. You're not even a creative school. Welcome. You're an alumni of the university. That's nice to see you. Who else? Other programs that people are alumni from? Yeah. Fantastic. Welcome. Are you engineering as well? Oh, you're just saying hi. Any other programs? Yeah. Wow, you've got it covered. Well, any others before I just shut anybody out? Welcome to this event. We are being streamed, so I know there's a lot of people over there. Hello, at home. I am Dean of the Creative School. And for those of you who don't know what the Creative School is, I'm going to do that next. I'm going to first do a land acknowledgement. Because as we're sitting here finally getting together as alumni for the first time in years, because we have these events and then because of COVID we weren't able to. I don't know about you, but the land on where we stand is even more important, and acknowledging it is something that acknowledging that we're basically here. Many of us and our ancestors are here as visitors, as settlers. This is the land which is part of a treaty called the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, and it was the Anishinaabe people, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee who got together and agreed to take care of the land, to protect it, to nurture it, to live here peacefully, and to also welcome other visitors and other nations, and that those included, of course, a lot of Europeans and people from around the world. And together we have through a treaty, an agreement to protect and nurture this land. And so I'm really always happy that we do acknowledge this and remember it as we meet here. The Creative School is a faculty that is home to all these programs, and the alumni from the Creative School that go around in the various fields are doing everything from creative industries work to innovation in other fields. We, as dean, I'm really proud of the fact that the 9 schools that we have, the professional schools in all the disciplines, are not just training people and giving people degrees, but we're actually nurturing the future potential of leadership and change making. So we're all about change, and you're all about change, and there's a lot of young people that are going through the process now of getting their foundation here. And one message I always like to share in any alumni event, that if you are in a position to give students or graduates a shot, a break to go to the next step, hire them, because that is what we want more than anything, is the pathway of success for our students, just like the paths that you've had and many others had around you. So I will not take much more time other than to welcome you and to thank everybody for being here, and you're going to be introduced properly in a minute. I won't just say hi. I'll let Rosemary introduce you, but I'm going to pass it on to Rosemary Quinlan, who will do the proper introductions. Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles, and welcome. To echo Charles, what a pleasure it is to host you all here tonight in person after 3 years, and welcome to Alumni Month at the Creative School. Alumni Month is a month-long celebration of our alumni community at TMU, showcasing faculty experts, award-winning alumni, and leadership within our community. Tonight, we're joined by fashion leaders who will together address sustainability considerations across the fashion value chain. The conversation will run for approximately 45 minutes, and then there will be time for Q&A. And then we welcome you all to stay and mingle and enjoy some food and beverage. So now I'll introduce our panelists. Our first panelist tonight is Lex Brown. Lex graduated from the School of Fashion in 2017 and is the founder of Neoteny Apparel, a Toronto-based lifestyle and fashion label defined by its sustainable production, level of craftsmanship, and unique personal style. Since the launch of Neoteny, she's made a point to have her clothes represent messages that are important to her, such as sustainability and gender representation. Our second panelist for the evening is Shelley Haynes. Haynes graduated from fashion both in 2015 and obtained her MA from the program or the school in 2017. Shelley is a lecturer and researcher based in Toronto with a focus on ethics and sustainability. Haynes is a lecturer at TMU and Humber College and instructs a diverse set of courses, including ethics and sustainability. Haynes is simultaneously completing her PhD on sustainable consumer behavior. Our third panelist tonight is Michonne Marigot. Marigot is a multitudinous design talent with a myriad of skills in both technical and creative design. Michonne designs for her namesake label, Michonne Marigot, and ascribes to the slow fashion ideology and creates seasonal collections of mindful luxury. She is currently based in Toronto, where she works as a 3D technical designer for Canada Goose, as well as a sessional instructor here at the Creative School, working in textiles. With a breadth of global industry experience and an unparalleled tenacity, Michonne is a well-rounded individual with a mind that thinks outside the box and aims to work in an innovative and sustainable way. I'd now like to introduce you to our moderator of the evening, Linda O'Malley. Linda is the founder of This Is Willow, a Canadian clothing brand based out of Toronto, committed to creating beautiful, ethical, and sustainably made clothing. Inspired by Linda's daughters, This Is Willow is a brand committed to ethical and sustainable practices, including the use of dead stock and sustainably sourced fabrics from natural fibers such as EcoVero and linen. Linda most recently worked in the academic sector here at TMU, where she was the acting manager of the Fashion Zone. There, Linda managed programming, mentor, and advisor network, service offerings, and the planning and implementation of the overall member experience strategy for the zone. Linda has a master's in environmental studies from York University, where she specialized in renewable energy policy. With that, I will turn it over to you, Linda, to kickstart the conversation.
Thank you for that introduction. So maybe to start, we can dig in a little bit more about our backgrounds in sustainability. So maybe starting with you, Lex.
Sure.
Yeah, what's your connection to sustainability and how did you get to where you are today?
So sustainability is really like the lens that all of my work, I would say, filters through. I first and foremost like to say that I'm a fashion designer, and then the sustainability aspect comes into it after. And alongside being a sustainable fashion designer, I also own like a women's consignment shop located in Hamilton. So it's interesting comparing like fashion at both ends of the life cycle of garment creation and like the end life of garments too. So that's my like relationship to sustainability, I think.
Shelley.
Thanks. So my background in sustainable fashion started when I did the undergraduate program here, the fashion design program. And then from there, I further explored sustainable fashion in the MA program. And there I was really looking at kind of the barriers that consumers were facing when they were consuming. So when they were looking into sustainable fashion, you know, what were the things that were kind of preventing them from consuming that way? And then now I'm working towards a PhD, and I'm continuing on that trajectory of understanding sustainable fashion through the lens of the consumer and trying to further understand that relationship that they have.
Michonne.
Hi. I guess the way that I would define what I do in relative to sustainability is that my collections are small, the production is small, and I work with dead stock, natural, or made to order materials when I can. And I also only produce what's ordered. So I make to order my collections aside from the samples, of course. And I just think too that in terms of when I design, I think of something that I want to have like a long life cycle and will not just be for one season, but timeless and can be passed on as well. Because I think it's important to think about how long something will be worn as well as what you're making it out of. So that's kind of how I design and hope that my clothes are received.
Oh, that's fantastic. And very curious in terms of like playing off that with the design, maybe expanding on how you integrate that into your business.
Yeah, totally. So for me, I would say I do a lot of naturally based fibers. I do a lot of upcycling, which is like taking old objects, I guess, and giving them a new life through the creation process. At least that's how I view it. I also use a lot of dead stock fibers. So that's kind of like leftover from other production materials. So I guess materials that are already in existence. But I also look for like creative ways to kind of push the boundaries of sustainable fashion. I truly believe that it's not like, there's not like one aesthetic to sustainable fashion. And like I said, like it should kind of almost come secondary to the design. Mind you, like sustainability needs to be considered throughout the entire process. So yeah.
100%. Yeah. I think one thing that comes up when you're designing is like just considering there's just so much that you can do to make something more sustainable. And there's a lot of different ways that you can come at it, right?
Totally.
From, I guess, from the pattern stage to sourcing, business practices as well. There's lots of things you can consider. I was thinking, maybe we could talk about like one challenge I've noticed is the cost and the affordability of
Totally.
sustainable fashion. And I thought maybe we could delve into that topic.
Yeah.
A lot of sustainable fashion brands tend to be a little bit pricier and out of reach for a lot of consumers, especially if you're looking at new fashion.
Totally.
So maybe Michelle, maybe you'd like to start, or whoever wants to pitch in.
I actually do have something I'd like to say about that. I think that I feel like Shelley would probably have more to say about this as well too, in terms of consumer behavior. I think that as well as there being a movement toward wanting for consumers to want to buy more sustainably, I feel like that's more of an ideology than what's actually put into practice, because it's so easy. And I've fallen into it too, where I buy fast fashion. And again, one of the barriers to, I guess, sustainable fashion is cost. But that being said, I think that we need to think more about not consuming as much. Like, I think that's the biggest thing, because I don't want to be like in olden times, but you used to have only, you had your Sunday outfit and then you had your everyday outfit. And so sure, if you want to wear a different outfit every day and you want to wear a different garment every day, then you're going to have to buy more items. And therefore, if they're more expensive, it's more difficult. Whereas if they're less expensive, it's far easier. But if we shift our behaviors and our thought towards, maybe buying far less and investing, and even thinking in terms of like, well, can I pass this on eventually? Like, how does this represent me if you're thinking that much about it, or how does this service me? Like, if you're more even just thinking about serviceability, because I think too that when we say fashion, we're thinking more about statement pieces, but we could also just be thinking about clothing in general. And so you might just invest in one piece that's quite expensive, but it does so much for you. So I think even just shifting our idea of how many clothes you have will make it less daunting to buy sustainably, because you're not buying as much.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's like thinking about the number of wears that you get per garment. I think that number has gone down with the, dawn of fast fashion.
Totally.
People just wear it and throw it out. But if you're spending more on something, just how many times are you going to wear it and have that consideration?
Totally.
Maybe you could talk, Shelley.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good way to think about it, where sustainable fashion isn't just a one for one, where you're replacing your, unsustainable consumption with consumption that may be deemed, sustainable. So these garments that are sustainable, because that would be really expensive. It's about making these choices that come from a value of being sustainable. So like you're saying, like maybe repairing the garments that you already have, really purchasing them for the long run, and incorporating them into your wardrobe as something that you're going to see as an investment to that wardrobe, regardless of that initial price of it, and that you're really going to maintain that and see that through its whole life, and also considering, where it is going to end up at the end. And I think that sustainability right now in terms of fashion kind of has a particular aesthetic, a particular price, but that's really just the start of it. It's more so about, as the consumer, how we are consuming it, and the frequency, and kind of the way that we're approaching it.
Totally. Would love to add some comments.
Go
in
for
there.
it.
In terms of like affordability, like I get it, like some sustainable fashion brands are really like kind of at a price range, but then I also like to look at like luxury and how that correlates, and like how, price isn't necessarily always associated with quality. I think someone like on social media deconstructed like a $1,500 Louis Vuitton bag, and like his quote of like materials and construction, he'd be like, it was like $150. So it's like, what is really like, what are we spending our money on? I also think that there's like more than one answer on how to like approach sustainability. Like, yes, you can attack it from the source and like purchase sustainable garments when you need new things. But I also think it's like, okay, like most people, well, I guess I can speak from my perspective, is like I mix high fashion and like fast fashion, but like I try my best for like the less affordable pieces to source sustainably. So like thrifting and like secondhand shopping, and also repairing garments, like looking at the long-term life cycle of things. And then like in the consignment world, it's kind of like nice when people initial shoppers will invest more in their garments and know that they can potentially get a slight return on the resale of their clothing, and they make money and like it gets a new home. So it's all like, it's a perfect cycle, I think. But there's definitely like more than one answer on how to approach that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, touching on that, you have H&M coming out with their sustainable lines where it's like 10% content, like recycled plastic or something. So you have this, the consumers are hearing about and they think it's sustainable. And so I wanted to like
Mhm.
ask you, Shelley, like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like this topic because I'm kind of on the fence. So I think that, H&M, what they're doing is greenwashing. They have this conscious collection, and there's many brands in that field that are doing something very similar. And I think that, of course, they're getting consumers in the door with their, appeals to sustainability. But I think that there's another side of that where they also have a really big audience, and that they can really start to spread that narrative about how important sustainability is. They do have it as their future goals, and it's something that now consumers, more generally are kind of demanding and asking for. So I think that they're still doing a lot that they need to improve on, but I think that they are informing consumers about at least what sustainability is, and kind of that's something that they should be expecting from their garments.
I have kind of a lot of different opinions about this, but I think that a big issue is that fashion as an industry, unfortunately, is not sustainable, and it won't be. And it doesn't matter really like, how far the policy goes, how well these companies start to produce and responsibly produce. Like, as a fashion designer and doing what I'm doing, like even on such a small scale, I still have to be honest that it's kind of a selfish choice to do this, because truly the most sustainable thing that we could do for the environment is for the industry to cease to exist. But then there are so many other implications, because it's such a complicated web in that so many industries, if not directly related to fashion, are indirectly related to fashion. And so, okay, if we were to just seize fashion, then there would be like global pandemonium, because everyone would lose, like so many people would lose their jobs. And so we've kind of put ourselves in a really difficult position. So in that, like, I think that, yeah, in terms of sustainable fashion and these companies doing these things, like they do need to be more responsible, and it's good that they're taking these steps, but I don't even know what the right answer would be in terms of the overhaul. But I think that there's a lot of things that need to be addressed. And I do think that as well as these companies, having these incentives and these initiatives, like I think that people need to also continue to or start being critical with their thought, because a lot of it is greenwashing. And so, it is good that they're thinking about these things. These companies are thinking about these things, but I think that there's also a lot of misnomers and like misleading information about how they are sustainable. And so it's the responsibility of the consumer as well to really address and understand what is what product they're actually being sold, and where their comfort level lies with that.
Totally. I'm like, I feel like we all kind of have mixed emotions about how we feel about like,
It's very difficult.
it's like
Topic.
you could go into, we could have like a whole panel discussion just on that. But like, I completely agree with you, Michon, in terms of like how they just want to sell us more. And there's a lot of like there's greenwashing for sure. And it's like, no coincidence that we hear sustainability and that it's also a trendy topic, and that like, it sells well, but it's like, you can't really be the solution and the problem, like, which I think like H&M is one of the world's leading fast fashion producers potentially is. Mind you, they also have the resources and the money available to them to actually kind of like experiment. I know they had like a textile diversion thing where like you dropped off garments or whatever, and you got like a discount, and I'm kind of like, yes to the beginning, but like, I don't want to like replace that with more stuff. So it's like love-hate relationship. But like to your point, Shelley, like it's great that the conversation is happening to like that wide range of audience, because like if they didn't introduce that, would this conversation even be happening? You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. And even thinking about it, they can have quite a large impact just by doing a little bit, because they're so big. If they have 10% of their production more sustainable, that's actually quite a good impact. And would love to see more of it. And here, like relocalizing fashion and the supply chain is going to take a lot of time. So that'll be, I guess we'll just have to chip away at it, right?
Totally. There used to be a fashion industry, like, and I mean, there's a fashion industry here, but I mean, like, in terms of like textile manufacturing and like production, and like, it's sad to see that gone. And like, I'm very hopeful, and like in my personal work, I try and foster that, at least in my own community, because I do see it fading. Yeah, we need to like localize fashion again. Hashtag local designers.
100%. Yeah. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about, I guess that question around like who's responsible. I guess in my opinion, it has to come from both, right? The
Totally.
companies have to make the change. We have small and independent, small brands arising that are making an impact. And on the consumer side, what do you think are the barriers to consumers more broadly uptaking sustainable fashion? And I was going to ask Shelley, but anybody can take it.
I do think that a large barrier is cost, but I think that again, like it's part of this question about, I mean, I actually don't know if I want to invite everyone into my weird web of how I think about this, but I'll start. And then if I'm going
go
too
there,
crazy, just tell me to scale it back. But I think that again, there's this issue with in some ways social media and this idea that we have to be on display at all times. So like even before, as a consumer, you may not have thought, oh, I need to be on display at all times, and therefore I couldn't possibly be seeing the same outfit twice in, I don't know, a week or whatnot. It's just embarrassing because people are watching me. And so there's this idea now that we're all it's not even an idea, it's actually the truth. We're all on display. And so I think that feeds into one wanting or feeling that almost the need to buy more in order to have more clothes and more outfits in order to show off those outfits. And so, yeah, how can you possibly afford a garment that's not inexpensive or fast fashion if you have to have so many outfits? And I think too, like it's maybe a sense of like a loss of identity because you are on display so much, you're taking less time to focus on it's strange, like you're focusing on yourself so much, but also, and I say yourself as like the general public, but you're not really focusing on yourself, because if I think about it, like my most cherished garments I'll wear over and over and over again. But if I'm thinking about in the lens of like what we're being shown now is like important for your brand or your presence in the social media scope, it's like you wouldn't want to have the same thing all the time. You want to show people how like many different outfits you have or how many, like what your style is. But I don't think that that's true to like what consumer behavior once was or would truly be if there wasn't this added pressure to have even just any sort of social media presence. And it's also a strange thing too, where like your captive audience, depending on if you're an influencer or not, but like you might have only 100 followers, you might have 100 million followers if you're really that famous. But I think everyone's kind of perception of the world at different scales is now quite skewed. So I think that until we can kind of even get back to our sense of self, it's going to be difficult to like truly be responsible consumers, because we're not even acting on behalf of ourselves, but on more so on behalf of our social
societal
media
norms or like,
selves. Yeah, and
yeah.
societal norms and like what we believe or perceive to be expected of us.
Yep, well, maybe,
I like that, yeah. I think that, and that related to that too, there's such blame, or companies are really quick to turn the blame to the consumer and say, and I think it goes back to like, theories of, well, the consumer dictates the market, right? And so it's really quick to say, well, the consumer's demanding fast fashion, so we're just going to provide it to them. But yet they're in this space where it's, there's a new collection every week. Gosh, some brands are dropping new things like multiple times a week. It's so tempting. And then you're also asking consumers to do the research and figure out, well, what is sustainable? And we know that like time is a privilege. So having them make these decisions on their own with probably not all of the information is really difficult. So I think it's hard to blame the consumer. I think that they have a role and a responsibility, but I think that in this case, it may come a little bit more top down, where it might come from like a governmental agency level, kind of setting certain regulations into place, right? And then dictating a little bit what these brands can and can't do, and then making that a little bit easier on the consumer, because just putting it on them, it's like a lot of information and responsibility too.
And like to add on to that, like the consumers don't want to be bombarded with like, oh my gosh, you should be sustainable, like all this stuff. Like it's a lot to put just on the consumer, I find. And it's like not, in my personal opinion, it's not just the consumer's responsibility. Like these products are here before the consumer even approaches them. So like there's a whole train of thinking that happens, and like why hasn't it become more sustainable pre-consumer? Like who knows, maybe the consumer does want this, you know what I mean? Like it's never been tried and tested. And I think that like, at least from my experience, they are looking for that. And like for a lack of options, sometimes it's sad to see that they are forced to purchase like, H&M.
Can I ask, because I don't know, like in your research on consumer behavior and sustainable fashion, Shelley, like, is there any sort of information, and I'm sure that there's reasons why it may or may not be, but like information being disseminated to the public about like, okay, so they are producing more sustainably, but have they reduced the amount they're producing? Because again, like that's still problematic. If you're still producing like 400,000 units, for instance, of a garment no one asked for, it doesn't matter that the fabrics they used are more sustainable. Like, why are there 400,000 units being produced? Like, do you know? Because I don't know. So I'm asking, like, have you come across anything about that type of?
Yeah, so there's some research that suggests that like sustainable fashion represents like 1% of the industry, which like partly makes sense because they should be producing smaller. But then in the other side of it, fast fashion is expected to increase like somewhere around like 30 to 40% in the next few years. So it's still on this like upward trajectory, despite the majority of consumers reporting that not only are they aware of sustainable fashion, but they're interested in it. Yet that interest is not translating to their behavior.
yeah, I guess their decisions are just, they do need a lot of education in some senses. I know a lot of people that are really good people. They're not thinking about who made their clothes. They're not thinking about the labor that went into that. And that goes back to like government saying, okay, we won't accept in our country clothes that are made unethically by people that are not paid well in poor working conditions. And sometimes we can do something like that from the top up, but then like bottom up, what can we do in terms of like, how do we educate consumers? Like, how do we raise this issue and topic and just make it more, I guess, large scale?
I think what you said about the who made your clothes thing is so important because, and I didn't really, I mean, I think about it often, but in terms of like our current conversation, I didn't think about it until just now, but I think especially from these larger corporations, so much of a focus on, oh, we're using this new fiber and like this fiber is recycled and it's so great. But I would almost be more inclined to, because there's also so much fabric already in existence. So it's like, okay, fine. Like, that's great. That textile innovation is absolutely awesome. It's phenomenal. Like, that's really amazing that we've been able to do this. But there is so much existing textiles already. I would rather, if I'm going to, be investing in a single product, maybe a product that's been produced, there's less of it produced, but it's been produced in a way that is sustainable and that like the person making it is paid fairly and like there's less of them made because maybe there is some sort of like, maybe not a pre-order process. I think that'd be too difficult for companies of this magnitude, but like more thoughtful, even design, because again, too, like just like when sales season rolls around, there's probably just as many products that were made in their sustainable line as there were in their fast fashion line. It's like, okay, so you create this product with this wonderful textile, but again, it's just going to go to landfill because no one bought it. Like where is that work being done? And also too, like in terms of who made your clothes, like these people are working in terrible conditions and it's not necessary because even, they're being paid for piecework. So they're making so many garments, but it's like, why don't you just pay this person a fair wage to make a normal amount of garments that would actually satisfy the consumer desire as opposed to making, I don't know, just like 600 garments for only 30 people who actually want it.
Totally. You just totally like kind of brought up something in my head and it's like, in my mind, the hierarchy of sustainability. And it's like all these choices that like as designers and consumers, we have to make and kind of leverage one against the other to try and navigate what is actually more sustainable. And it's a lot. It can totally be a lot. And even more so for people who like aren't necessarily educated about what makes something more sustainable. But it's true. You have people who I always love to bring it up. It's like vegan leather. I'm like, I'm not against polyurethane. And like, I think that innovations such as like, pineapple leather and like mushroom leather are like fantastic because those things are actually sustainable. But I also don't really understand the correlation of vegan leather versus like leather that is a byproduct of another industry or actually being used or like vintage furs, like that can be upcycled and given a second life. Like I find some confusion in navigating like that hierarchy of like sustainability, but I think it's interesting when you're presented with all of these decisions and like you as the consumer are the person who needs to figure out like, oh my gosh, what actually is more sustainable? Is it dead stock fiber that is like sitting in Canada since 1957, like a more sustainable option to use? It's probably polyester, like who knows? Or should I ship some new textile innovation in from like overseas and get that giant carbon footprint? And like, there's a lot of thinking that goes into like, even just the sourcing alone that, I think there's a lot of decisions. It's really just a lot of decisions.
Get decision fatigue.
I'm a bit tired.
Maybe we can start talking about some key takeaways. Like, what are some like 3 things that consumers can do today to make a difference and to live more sustainably in terms of fashion? Start with Lex.
Sure. Number 1, I'm kidding. No, okay, let's go alphanumeric. There's no perfection in sustainability. Like literally any contribution is a contribution, even if it's subconscious or like not even subconscious, like any contribution is a contribution. So if you're like, oh my gosh, like I want to have one more piece and you are more sustainable around it, or you're like, oh my God, I want to go thrift shopping. Like both of those are great sustainable decisions. But I'm also like, there's not just one answer and there's not just one approach. So don't worry about being perfect. We're all working on this together. Number 2, secondhand shopping. I heard like, I don't know if I am like making this up, but I'm pretty sure I heard that like the resale industry is going to grow by like, it's one of the fastest growing industries within the next 5 years. And like, that to me is kind of interesting. So like shopping secondhand is like really cool now. And then my 3rd thing would be look at the construction of your clothes and always at the content label, even if you're going to buy something, like before you're going to buy something.
I think the most sustainable thing you can wear is something you already own. I'll put that one
Totally.
out there. Shelley.
Fix your stuff.
Those are my 3.
Oh my
Okay.
God,
No,
stop.
just kidding,
Ditto.
just
No, I'm
kidding.
kidding.
No, those are excellent. To add to that, I think that this idea of kind of either consuming what you already have or like when you're making that purchase, really, thinking about the long term of that purchase and really thinking about, what do I have in my wardrobe? Where does this fit in? is it a need or is it a want? And both are valid, but then, really committing to that garment and really seeing it through. Ideally, it would be maybe something that was secondhand, but regardless, something that you can kind of invest in moving forward. And I also think kind of part of that is really assessing like your own values. What do you value about sustainable fashion? There's so many things, like we've said, that you could do to be sustainable. So kind of finding the ones that you think are maybe the most feasible for you, or the ones that you're most interested in, and really just kind of like leaning into those and kind of becoming an expert at those, and then starting to introduce other ways to be sustainable to kind of expand that. Because I think that part of it is it's really overwhelming. Like you said, fatigue, like it's a lot, and to, be really critical of yourself and your own behaviors. It could for some, and I think that the research kind of shows that when people feel like they're not making a lot of progress, or they feel really maybe judged by what they're doing, they kind of shut down and they don't engage in sustainable behaviors. So if, it's really celebrating what you're doing and kind of building upon that, I think that is really just like the first step to being sustainable.
I think that both of you gave fabulous answers. And I would say that the one thing that I think is also really kind of important is maybe also doing things like taking time to go through like what you already have, like you kind of said. And, even a nice way to like build community and to share is to either do like, clothing swaps, or, very common now, again, it's bringing back to social media, is like a story sale, or like, finding a way, if say you do want to get rid of something, to maybe extend its life by either passing on to someone, or, even like if you think you have something that a friend might really like, you can foster like a nice moment by being like, oh, I was looking through my things and I found this, I thought of you and I think you'd really like it. Like, let's get together and I'll give it to you and we can have a coffee or something. Like,
Kind of love
I don't know, something nice like that. And I think thrifting is really, if you do want to buy something new, like buy something old and it's just new to you. And then lastly, again, like we were saying, like if you do feel inclined, make an investment into your wardrobe and maybe buy something that is special in some respect to you and fits in your wardrobe in a way that like just kind of an extension of you, and in that you'll probably have it for longer. Just think about the longevity and the life cycle of what you're consuming. I think is a really good way to be more sustainable. But
That's like caring, like the care aspect, right?
Yeah.
Caring for your clothes, like
Totally.
you love them, you take care of them, you hang them up properly, you wash, you don't throw them in the dryer. All the different things that you can do.
And you repair
Alterations.
them.
Yeah, and I know we were talking the other day and you had this really great idea of editing your clothes,
Yeah,
right?
like I do alterations for people, and I kind of just opened it up more recently to people who are shopping secondhand and literally need like a little nip and tuck here to make that one garment perfect to them. But I also, like, for example, think that you should take into consideration your options at the end of the life cycle of a garment. Like, I'm really bad with like staining clothes and like that. I literally stay away from like all whites and cream colors because of it. But I'm also like, when that moment arises, I'm not like, oh my God, this stained garment, get rid of it. It's like, this presents an opportunity for me to experiment with dyeing. Like, it's so fun. And then like, yeah, you can like take a different approach and like, I don't know, have fun with it. And then your garment has even more character than when, you started. But I do think like taking care of your garments, like knowing how to take care of your garments is important. I get people all the time who come in and they're like, can I just like throw this silk in the dryer? And I'm like, no, please don't, like, please don't. But repair is important because you have a relationship with your clothes. Like, you wear them every day, or at least I think you should have a relationship with your clothes. And like, if you take care of them, they'll take care of you. So yeah.
I love the idea of thinking about clothes that you can give to your kids, like that they'll still love it, I love clothes from the 50s. I think they're gorgeous. And I like the 20s. I love vintage fashion. So I want more things made like that.
Can I make a very interesting point just based
Yes.
off that? I
And a very interesting point, in my opinion.
in my opinion, this is a very interesting point, or rather, observation of like at least having a consignment store. I absolutely love, and I feel like this proves that fashion is like potentially cyclical, or like I think of fashion is like more of a spiral rather than a circle. But we literally get like the coolest like 80-plus-year-old women who bring in like the most amazing stuff. And I see like a younger generation buying it. And like, to me, that is like the coolest full circle moment that can happen, as we build relationships with people. Like, it's so interesting. That's my observation, guys. I think it's really cool.
So my one fear is moths.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. We don't.
how do you handle it? I read an article once where I think they were saying feed your moths, like give them something good to eat in the other corner, and then they'll leave your good stuff alone, right?
That's actually smart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Favorite sweater?
Yeah.
Is there anything else we'd like to add, or should we open it up to questions? Q&A? Okay.
Yeah.
We would love to take questions from the audience. Who has a question? Okay, guy in the back. I know your name is Emad, right? No.
Wow.
Now, I'm trying to understand what's the meaning of sustainability in your fashion context. I know about my engineering, and I'm sure you know your job, no doubt. But in my brain, it's traditional a little, of course, analytical as well. Fashion is a little away from functionality, which is all in engineering here. So what I'm thinking, again, don't take it serious. It's just thinking out of the box.
Totally.
For example, just saying example, earrings, right? You design it, make it match, blah. But what I think in engineering, I say, what's the functionality? If it's fashion, if it's sustainable, if I eliminate it, I have zero effect on the environment, right? I don't know, just a little
Food for thought, lots of it.
I would say I think fashion can be very functional.
Mhm.
In my opinion, we
I-
wear it every day. Go ahead.
To continue that, I think that like one of the main reasons that we see fashion becoming so unsustainable is because it's gone pretty far away from functionality, and those two are correlated with, I also believe, timelessness. Like timelessness in design, at least from my experiences, also has translated to more functionality in design. However, I do want to put some emphasis on the purpose of fashion as communication. I know that it's not, potentially seen as essential, but I would also think that individuality is important for humans as like people. So I like to think of fashion as a form of communication. Mind you, my definition of sustainability definitely is the minimal imprint on the earth. And I think that it gets translated in bigger industries with a lot of greenwashing. So it doesn't necessarily trickle down to be that. It's just like, ooh, new fiber, 10%. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, it's not genuine. But yeah.
I think there's also like this idea, and it's perpetuated constantly, that like functionality and fashion and functionality are in stark opposition. But I think that if you take like fashion and kind of break it down also in one perspective, like creating beauty and in the world, like I think that, I mean, again, everyone has their own idea of what beauty is, and like that's a whole other conversation. But I think bringing beauty into the world does serve a function. Like if we're just living in a way that's completely what is, I think in the way that you're describing is functional, it kind of takes the joy out of what life is and renders it meaningless. But you know, and also just respect to like just my fashion business and my idea of fashion. It's again also like an economy of scale in a way. And like I produce so little and I only make to order. And so in that, it's like I am only making what people want. So if they're going to consume it and they want it, then in that, like, I think that that's pretty sustainable because again, like they're making that purchase. Like it's a very conscious decision. And so in that, they're going to hopefully keep it for a long time and extend the longevity and the life cycle of whatever they've decided to purchase.
You have a question here.
Oh. Yeah. Hi, my name's Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
I came to the event today because I thought we are talking sustainability on the runway. And I think that what Kelly Drennan is doing is
Mhm.
really important.
I agree.
But as a journalist, when I was covering the show, it was really difficult because I thought what I'm seeing on the runway, it was easy for things that were upcycled and they were patched and it was visible. But as far as the messaging, it was really difficult.
Mhm.
So that piece about informing the consumer or having a informed consumer.
Yeah.
Is really challenging. So that I think that's my question to you. If you were on the runway,
Mhm.
how would you be expressing that in terms of beyond the model?
Totally. I have a little bit of experience in Runway and I've fallen in and out of love with it because I agree the relationship of how I would like to present my garments isn't necessarily translated. I feel it potentially isn't beneficial. Like all this work goes into like this literally like 2 minutes of you showcasing it and then it's done. I have found much more success with kind of like a controlled environment, I would say gallery setting, which opens up like the transparency between, or at least gives you a little bit of background. Like usually like, you know, Fashion Week shows have like show notes now, and they have like behind the scenes where people can see the garments on display, get up close and personal with them. I like personally feel like Runway is not gonna be around forever. Like it's fun as a showcase, but in terms of like selling fashion, I feel like it's more of a hype. But I agree that it's difficult to navigate in terms of like communicating with your end consumer and audience. I would much rather like be like, here, touch my clothing, or like have the model stop and you can actually like, you know, try stuff on. Like that's a more intimate experience, I think, that we're kind of robbed of in the Runway sense.
And I think that to build on that, like so if runways are kind of in a transition, I think maybe even the field is kind of in a transition too, where it's less about being defined by specific behaviors and starting to become more like understood as a core value. And this kind of issue that you're talking about for the runway is something that even in store that the brands are having a difficult time with, because consumers only want the information about how the garment is sustainable, but then they don't want to read too much information. So it kind of puts the brand in a difficult position to communicate that to them because the consumer isn't really reading that information anyway. So I think that that sort of extends to this issue on the runway where how are we communicating that to them and like what is their preferred method of getting that information? I think it's really tough.
Totally.
Thanks, Shelley. I'll turn the question to another person.
Just to add on that, will you guys be having a sustainability runway in the future or no?
I honestly, with like the pandemic and things and like runways going digital and like that influence, I think that, I mean, I'm finding that it's doesn't really make sense to continue with Runway personally. Like I don't necessarily see myself like working 6 months of a year to produce a collection that's on stage for like half a minute. It's like fun, but I would much rather have like an exhibition gallery space or something like that. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be doing much Runway, at least in the future. Or maybe like take more control with it, like show off season where it's like I can actually control the setting and the environment. It's also like important to note that like when you're going to these shows, like it's organized by one main person. So it's really like you're presenting through their lens. Like it'd be amazing if we could all be like, you know, a Paris Fashion Week, Balenciaga, like whole room full of mud, but that's not really attainable for a lot of people. So I would just say keep that in mind. Yeah.
I'm going to keep my comment quite brief. I have no interest in doing the runway for my personal collection because truthfully, like my appreciation for the runway is for those overly exuberant, incredible theatrical shows. And like that is not sustainable, but it is absolutely spectacular. And if I'm going to be at a runway show, I want it to be a spectacle, but I'm not going to be participating in any of those anytime soon. So I don't have any interest in like trying to, because the thing is like, it's not really something that makes much sense to do a runway show unless you are going big in like the most simplest terms. And by taking the time to try and dilute what a runway show is into something that you can present and pretend is somewhat sustainable or like is presenting sustainability makes no sense to me. And so I have no interest in participating in that respect.
I'm going to pass it to next question.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Susan. Thank you so much for the great presentation and the work that you do. I'm just wondering if you might have touched upon that, the 3 main or 1 to 3 main obstacles to sustainability, if each one of you say that. Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I'll speak from like the perspective of the consumer. The number one cited barrier from the consumer perspective is simply cost. They feel that sustainable fashion is too costly. And then, I mean, the list goes on from there, but that's always number one.
Totally. I would say from the creating clothing perspective, like the designing perspective, I mean, cost is also a factor, because like it's cheaper to get fabric from like Korea or China, for example, than it could potentially be to get a sustainable fabric that's made in Canada. And I'm hoping to see that change over time with, you know, industry kind of rebuilding. But that's definitely a challenge. Awareness, I would say, is another challenge, like making people actually aware that like, you know, some fashion's bad, quote unquote. And like there are sustainable options out there. And like I would say my main one is definitely like sourcing materials that align with my version of sustainability. It's hard. You have to do a lot more work to find, say, the similar replacement in the non-sustainable format. That's me. Those are my, I think.
Okay. I'll be able to do one last question if that's okay. And then we'll pack it up and get some food.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a designer and engineer. I don't have any questions, and thank you so much for you guys. But I just want to mention and have some comments about the guy that talk about like about the fashion design and it's not going to be functional. Well, I think it's not right, even as an engineer, because like I search a lot and I've seen so many examples that fashion actually help to make it more functional, the engineer sides, even like a jewelry and like shoes designs that help some people who have disability.
Totally.
So it's like even designing some earrings that helps some people who has disability with hearing and stuff. So I think if we think about it more carefully and search it a lot, we can find out that actually engineering and fashion design can work closely tied together and make the stuff and the designs more functional. And not only that, but also if you think more openly, not as a fashion, just even as a design, then it can blow your mind how these designs in engineering can like change the world actually. So yeah, this is my idea. I think it helps actually to make more functional.
I agree.
Thank you so much for saying that. I really agree with you. And I think that's a really interesting point. There are a lot of innovations in fashion that are, yeah, like extremely functional. The pair of shoes I think you might be mentioning, there's a pair of shoes from Nike that are able to be put on and off entirely without use your hands, and this helps a lot of people with like mobility, and there's a lot of innovations like that. And I think too, like quality of life is something that's often missed in the conversation about sustainability in fashion or just in life in general.
Such an interesting topic. I think that could be a whole other panel. Yeah.
Let's go round two. No kidding.
So, yeah, I know, maybe for next time. So I wanted to thank our speakers today for amazing conversation, and thank you all for coming out.
Oh, thanks.
Should I pass it over to you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And yeah, just to kind of echo Linda, the Q&A kind of wraps up our formal part of the evening. So thank you to everyone here for joining us today, and a big thank you to our panel and our moderator. Thank you very much. Round of applause. So before we invite you to enjoy food and drink, I just wanted to quickly introduce to you an event coming up on November 28th at TMU. It's the TMU Upcycled Gear Fashion Show, which I think Lex has some involvement in. It's a charity sustainable fashion show event. At the fashion show, you can see the looks that our panelists created for the TMU Upcycled Gear Collection, which is a series of 25 outfits made entirely from upcycled Ryerson and Rams branded materials. The TMU Upcycled Gear Collection will be modeled by student athletes and auctioned at the event. All proceeds and ticket sales are going to benefit the TMU Bold Equity and Inclusion Award. So this event at the intersection of sports, fashion, and sustainability, the TMU Upcycled Gear Collection will highlight the art of transforming excess and unused materials into beautiful and creative expressions of our university's legacy. You can find out more and get tickets on the TMU Upcycled Gear Fashion Show webpage on the TMU Bold site. So again, thank you all for joining, and I'd like to invite you for some food and drink now.